Gavin, Hain, how are you, mate?
Cannot complain. Pretty good.
Thank you very much for jumping on.
It's an honour.
How did you get into martial arts? You've been doing martial arts for a long time, probably about as long as I have. How did it all start for you?
Well, when I was a kid, I was addicted to Mortal Kombat, and I was playing that as a kid and just thought it was awesome. And then I watched all the old school like tournament videos of like Bruce Lee and Van Damme, and kind of would always hire out those videos and then just headed in that direction. And then I was addicted at a young age, and it just led to another thing and another thing. And then I don't know what, almost 30 years later, still doing it. So
it all started from Mortal Kombat. We're talking about the old school Mortal Kombat
old school
one?
Mortal Kombat 1, for sure. Yeah, I used to play it when I was really young. And just liked watching Bruce Lee and Van Damme videos and things like that. That was it. Street Fighter as well, and you know.
Love it, mate. You're a Jiu-Jitsu black belt. You're a second degree black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. I know you've got other black belts as well, but what was the first style that you started off with?
I started with Kempo Karate when I was, I think, about 12 years old. I did a little bit prior here and there. I did like a little bit of Judo, but I guess where we were, there wasn't really much happening, and then I wasn't able to stick to it because I was too young and couldn't drive myself there. So I committed when I was about 12, 11, something like that, and just kept at it from there. And I was able to, make it 4 or 5 times a week. And as a teenager, that's all I did. And still now, as an adult, that's all I'm doing.
And the transition from striking arts, I mean, I remember my first introduction into Jiu-Jitsu, it was quite humbling. I think most people's introduction is quite humbling. I got my ass handed to me by a girl.
Yeah, I think it was the same for me.
Really? Yeah. What was the situation for you when you first got into Jiu-Jitsu?
So I initially started with it was Kempo Karate, but it was kind of like a mix of striking, and there was a little bit of grappling. And eventually from there they branched out because there was too much in the grading curriculum. So it was just, all right, we'll leave the striking art alone, and then we'll have the grappling art, and then we'll separate them. Where we had tournaments that we'd always be going to, and I thought, oh yeah, I might enter in this grappling one. I haven't done it before. So I think the first time I actually did any jiu-jitsu grappling, which back in the day was called ground fighting, we just started on our knees and then just had a little wrestle. I jumped in a competition without doing any grappling, and that was my introduction. I went against, I think, like a brown belt in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu at the time, and I think, there was a female in there as well, and I had no idea what to do, and I was absolutely destroyed and ruined after that, and I thought, far out, I've really got to get good at this, because I just got humbled, not knowing anything at all, and that was fun. Yeah.
No, it is. It's very humbling, I think. One thing for me, especially too, Gav, is martial arts has impacted my life in so many different ways. I always say anything that's good that has happened in my life has been a result of practicing martial arts. How has martial arts impacted your life?
I think in a way, there's been a lot of things. I think I don't know who I would be if I didn't do martial arts anyway. I've been doing it forever anyway. I'd be stupid to say that it's not changed who I am, and it's helped me through a lot of hard times, through relationship problems with family, to feeling like an outcast, to confidence, to everything really. I was having this conversation the other day where it brings in a lot of misfits where you feel like there are a lot of people that probably feel like they don't get along with anyone. They just don't really know what direction to head in life. We have a lot of lost souls, I guess, in a way, where people come here and then they can just find themselves at home, where you could be, a lawyer, you could be any walk of life really. You could be a comedian, it doesn't really matter. You could be a plumber, and everybody just comes together and then they can just find that camaraderie with everybody. So I feel that I made a second family, which basically I do more martial arts and I do hang out with family. So it is my number one place I feel comfortable.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And one thing as well, we start martial arts obviously for self-defense. The question I think that would be very interesting is, Have you ever had to use it for real on the street?
Yes, I have had to use self-defense. And it was, I guess you are who you hang out with in a way, where I was putting myself in situations when I was a teenager, feeling like an outcast and a misfit, where I didn't really have any good friends or any good role models. So outside of martial arts, I'd just try and find friends, or I'd move to a new area and I'd be probably hanging around the wrong people. And I do remember there was a bunch of different altercations with people that they knew that I did something and they'd just make fun of me. And then I remember being in a situation here and there where some of them tried to attack me to see what would happen. And then I remember just ragdolling a couple of people and controlling them and putting them down from, like, say, a body lock or a hip throw, and then just holding them in certain positions. And I felt like I was getting tested, but I was obviously hanging the wrong people anyway, in the wrong group, which I realized that pretty soon. I do remember another situation once. I was out in Surfers Paradise and I was just hanging out for a friend's birthday. There was one of my mates was talking to one of his friends who was a girl. There was some other guy who started chatting to this girl and was kind of like being a bit aggressive. And then all my friend did was go, "Hey, what's going on?" Just like, leave her alone, she's not interested. And then the guy started punching him in the face, and I just was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then I started getting hit by the side, in the side of the head. And then there was like 4 or 5 of them. I had no idea what was going on. I just brought my hands up and they were throwing heaps of punches. And it was in a nightclub environment. So yeah, a lot of people around, lights flashing. I ended up holding onto one guy as I was getting pulled from a guy behind and hit in the head. I threw a couple of knees, ended up getting pulled to the ground to where there was about 3 or 4 guys just kicking me. I just had my hands up and I was kicking away and ended up kicking this guy away. And then there was still 2 others around. I remember turning to the side to get up, and the last thing I remember was somebody just booted me in the side of the head. And then I woke up from the security guards lifting me up and putting me outside, and I had no idea what was going on. So I was like, yeah, I was a brown belt in karate or something at the time, but it didn't really matter at all. All I could really do was just keep my hands up, and then I tried to throw a knee or two just from a natural instinct from grabbing this guy, but there was multiple attackers. I got pulled to the ground, slipped over, and I was just getting the shit kicked out of me, really. So it happened so quick. That was probably one of the worst situations. But luckily I was taught from that negative reinforcement to keep my hands up and not get hit in the head so much.
It's interesting too, Gav. People are always going to, troll on the internet. And there's an argument that jiu-jitsu is useless against multiple attackers. You'd never go to the ground in a street fight. It's a death sentence. I disagree, because I think there's a time and a place for grappling. More importantly, jiu-jitsu is the only martial art on the planet that teaches you how to get back to your feet in an altercation. We don't want to go to the ground, and generally if we do go to the ground, it might be because they've taken us down against our will. But if you work in corrections, security, law enforcement, and you have to detain a suspect, I think jiu-jitsu is extremely important. That being said, striking arts have a place, but I also think nowadays most people have phones and CCTV cameras. It's probably going to look bad if you implement striking in a self-defense situation. What do you think, and what's your thoughts on people that sort of shit on jiu-jitsu, saying it's useless for the street? And also, how have you found jiu-jitsu in the sense that it helps fight an altercation in a more humane way? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, 2 things. I have been in a situation where I've had a lot of police officers that I've worked with, as well as security guards that have come to me and said, look, all I know is karate and Muay Thai, and I can't keep elbowing and kneeing people in those situations because I'm going to lose my job. So obviously it's kind of common sense to a certain way to think, okay, I'll put it like this. You're very, very naive to think that if you just do jiu-jitsu, that you only know how to do things on the ground. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of schools that really just focus on competition, where they might just grab and sit down and pull guard. If you do no stand-up whatsoever, it's going to be pretty bad if you're in a self-defense situation. But there's a bunch of different branches. If you look at it really from jiu-jitsu, where it's like now we're heading in the direction where there's competition, okay, where you just might be playing around and doing gi, you get your grips, you sit down, you miss that element of actual doing any stand-up whatsoever. I think you would have enough common sense to, if somebody grabs you, to be able to take them down, even if you did very minimal stand-up anyway, to, let's say, a self-defense situation where if you're doing jiu-jitsu, maybe you're not real tech savvy with all the new upcoming lapel guards and things like that, where you're inverting underneath and doing certain types of leg locks and things like that. But I feel that if you're doing more self-defense, you should be practicing a hell of a lot of stand-up as well. And if somebody does attack you, if somebody does grab you, and all you know is pull guard, you're going to be in a very bad situation. We used to get this back in the day where there were more, say, MMA guys trying to complement their maybe already striking and the little bit of grappling that they had. They would want to get better to actually compete in MMA, where, you know, they're not really focusing too much on gi grips and going for cross lapel chokes. That's great, but then again, it really depends on what you get into martial arts for, in a way, and say self-defense for, you know, jiu-jitsu or competition jiu-jitsu, or maybe you want to get better at, you know, competing in martial arts or something in MMA. They're all going to be a little bit different. So it's fine. Everybody gets into jiu-jitsu for whatever reason they want to.
Another thing is too, mate, these trolls online that put shit on jiu-jitsu. What if you're confined to an elevator? What if you're in a car, in a locked car? I mean, striking, you're not really going to have a lot of leverage. Women especially can benefit from jiu-jitsu. One of the techniques that I really love is the triangle choke off the back. And that's another thing. I think chokes, there's nothing quicker that shuts off the human brain than a chokehold. Of the hundreds of chokes that are in jiu-jitsu, what is some of the most effective chokes? Because you've fought MMA before. What are some of the most effective chokes that you heavily agree transfer well to the street?
I would have to say it's obviously rear naked choke and a guillotine, because let's say somebody's trying to do, say, a rugby tackle and take you down. If you have the knowledge enough to sprawl and then actually go for a choke, or worst case is they're much bigger than you, they do take you down and you're able to go for a guillotine, that would be wonderful. Or you do happen to get your opponent's back, which you do see in a lot of self-defense videos, where maybe that person gets taken down and then that person who was getting attacked finally does get their attacker's back. You can obviously go for a rear naked choke. It doesn't really matter how big their muscles are. You should probably win that battle. That's always going to be a safer option than maybe going for, say, an armbar, or say maybe a leg lock or something like that. So safer positions where, if I was in a self-defense situation, or if I was teaching somebody self-defense, I'm not going to be teaching them spider guard. I'm not going to be teaching them de la riva, unless you're up kicking them in the face to get to a standing position. But ideally, you want gravity to be in your favor, take them down. That would be great. But like you said, a triangle choke, sometimes you don't have that opportunity. You just get put on your back and you're defending maybe them striking, and then you're able to sneak in a triangle choke. But like I was trying to get to before, you're naive to think that that's a go-to. You know, obviously you want to be in a standing position where you can actually avoid the takedown completely. From a self-defense point of view, if all you have is going on your back and going for a triangle choke, it's not going to be that good, because there could be, you know, jiu-jitsu is good at you being able to adapt to your surroundings. So it's like, oh, they grab you here, okay, I break that grip, they adjust, you're constantly adjusting. So if somebody tries to take you down, great, you can sprawl, you can circle around, you can take their back, you can go for a rear naked choke. Maybe you sprawl, it doesn't really work, they do take you down, you're on your back, you're in guard, and that's what jiu-jitsu has given to martial arts, is being able to be on your back and finish the match. You know, you get put in a guard, as long as you know how to sweep, submit, or take your opponent's back, you're good. And if none of those things are working, you might have to kick away and stand up and get back up. But otherwise, you are getting pinned. So if you are getting pinned by somebody bigger than you, I would go for a triangle choke. If it doesn't work, and same thing in MMA, if you're just stalling, you're just holding onto your opponent, which would be the same in self-defense, you're just stalling. So there's a time and place. Obviously, if they're trying to punch you in the head, hold your partner really close, but you're not getting out of that position. So as soon as they do posture up, you can kick away and start to get back up. Or maybe they're posturing up to where you can't kick them away. I would be going for a triangle choke, trying to choke them out. And then again, if that doesn't work, as they're trying to adjust and throw your legs off, use that to get the hell back to your feet and get back to a better position where you're more mobile and you can actually bring your hands up and maybe avoid the position. Because getting put on your back, you know, it's fine if you're on the mat. But then again, if you're on concrete or gravel or something like that, I don't really want to be mucking around in guard too much. But sometimes you have no other opportunity to do those other things, so you just will put in that position. So you've got to have an answer to it.
Yeah, 100%, mate. It's a great observation too, and I think there's a time and a place for specific techniques. And we were talking about the triangle choke. I mean, for a self-defense situation, if a woman was in a sexual assault, that is one of the most amazing techniques. Is because, you know, a woman that can actually employ utilizing her legs, which are obviously a stronger body part, can render an attacker unconscious, and then obviously she can exit the situation. One thing, especially with chokeholds too, is there was an incident in New York. There was a situation where someone had intervened in an altercation and put a chokehold on someone and held the choke on far too long. Unfortunately, that person died, and the person is actually up for manslaughter charges. One thing I think that's really important for coaches especially is to impress upon when we do teach chokeholds that we do have to heavily rely on understanding to let go once the person is out. New students that have come through the door, how have you sort of dealt with, you know, the self-defense side of things, the caution, the warnings about techniques? What's your thoughts on all that?
I always say, don't test the limits. I mean, with the choke, it's okay to a certain extent. You feel like it's not pain. You're going, as soon as your opponent goes limp, you're letting go straight away anyway. But anybody new that comes in, I'm always saying to them, make sure you tap on your opponent. If you tap on yourself or you tap on the ground, they might go a little bit further. Let's say they're in an arm lock. They're going to test the limits because they just are. They've got that ego. Tap earlier rather than later, because, you know, in a chokehold, you know, they might not know and they're squeezing and you're still on top and you've been choked out, and then they don't know and they're still squeezing. You could definitely do some damage as well. But yeah, usually if anybody ever goes limp, we're stopping it straight away. And it happens here and there with the higher ranks. You know, you're caught, especially a triangle choke. It's a perfect example. You're okay, and then like triangle escapes. They've got to be pretty simple because you're like, what was I doing again? You're actually about to go to sleep as well. So if anybody ever goes limp, we're stopping straight away. And then if you look at, say, which I'm sure you've seen some videos before, somebody goes for like a rear naked choke or a guillotine or something like that. And the worst thing is they go limp and they just let them go and their head hits the ground, which will more than likely do most of the damage. Where I think I did see the video that you're referring to. He had the hooks in, he was going for a rear naked choke and trying to control the situation, but he just kept squeezing and squeezing, and then obviously did a lot of damage there as well. So, yeah.
Have you ever been choked out before? I remember my experience. It's a very unusual and weird experience. What about you, mate? I'm sure you've been...
A bunch of times. Luckily, my opponents let go. But then again, I remember being choked out when I was mucking around, probably the first time with my brother. Just, you know, I was training at the time. He was doing a little bit of training. I was like 13, and he literally just locked his legs around my neck and squeezed like a scissor choke, and I just went to sleep. And then he was shaking me to wake me up, and I couldn't really hear anything, but I was just trying to shake my head off. And he was like, "Oh, I thought you were having a seizure or something." I was like, "No, I was just..." I felt like I had the best sleep I've ever had in my life, and I was just shaking my head off because I couldn't hear anything and I was not really that coherent. And then I was just coming back and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good. I would not recommend it, but then again, tap early rather than going to sleep.
Yeah.
So,
What do you think people should learn martial arts? I think there are a bunch of reasons why people do martial arts, but I think if more people did, especially jiu-jitsu, one thing, it teaches humility. It teaches, obviously, you know, it builds confidence, self-esteem, but people that train in martial arts, I've found, are some of the nicest and kindest people I've ever met. They're not looking for fights. They have the reassurance and the assertiveness to you know, when they're in public, to carry themselves in a way where they will probably most likely avoid confrontation. And what do you think are some of the benefits that you've seen, especially with your students, through practicing martial arts?
I guess if you look at, like, we've had kids come in here that maybe 5, 6 years old, and then they don't even want to even like sit in and watch a class. And then I remember there was one kid where it took him probably about like 3 months to even get onto the mat. His dad was training at the time, and he came in and he was just like, oh, just watch it, because his dad was doing it and he wanted to get him into it. And he was so timid, so shy, and didn't even want to be in this environment at all. So I think what had happened, actually, he took him away for a while, and then a couple of months later he brought him back because he was just hanging out while his dad was training. And he saw the other kids playing, and then eventually he got to the stage where he was able to do a class, and he was still shy, still timid. And then months later, he's completely come out of his shell. He's built his confidence, and it's showing even with him at school as well. And he's just, completely coming out of his shell. You can actually have a bit of a conversation with him, where he was such a shy, timid kid, and now he's competing, which is crazy.
Amazing.
And winning a competition with his dad, actually winning a competition as well, which was really cool to see. And he's actually incredibly technical. That's really cool to see as well.
Yeah.
Also, anything hard in life is worth striving towards. Anything easy and just given to you, you kind of don't really appreciate it as well. Like, you see these learners with their BMWs as well. You're like, and when I was a kid, I could not even imagine driving around a BMW or anything like that, as an example. But they're just like, oh yeah, whatever. They don't really appreciate it. I feel that jiu-jitsu, it's hard. And that's why it's so rewarding. You see somebody get their blue belt or their purple belt. It makes life so much easier. Yeah. And it's funny that you can have the worst day, come in, train, and you're around similar, like-minded people. You've got to be switched on and be in the moment because somebody's trying to twist your arm or choke you out or something like that. But you can't be thinking of anything externally. It's the same with all exercise. But I feel jiu-jitsu, there's much more of a camaraderie as well. Although it is a solo sport, you can't do it without other people as well. Yeah. And as bad as your day can be, you can come in and then all you've done is a little bit of training and you have the best outlook on life as soon as you leave. Yeah, there's a red light, who cares? You don't even worry about it at all. Where I feel that's very bad for a lot of people that don't have that outlet. You know, it doesn't have to be martial arts. I mean, that's great. I've done that my whole life. But then again, let's say if you're not part of any community whatsoever, like you can go to the gym and you can work out, you can put your headphones in. It's very solo, very antisocial, where you've got to be a part of a community and lots of like-minded people here. I feel like it really shines for the rest of your life about, I guess, much less stress in everything else that you do. And I know myself, if I'm teaching a lot, I'm still a part of it, but if I'm not training myself, like my life could be going great. And then all of a sudden I'm just like, why am I in a bad mood or just annoyed or just short-tempered? Oh, I haven't even trained for a while. And as soon as I do, I'm like, oh, I don't have any stress anymore. So
I think you made a really good observation there. I call this, or I learned this actually, voluntary adversity is putting yourself in uncomfortable positions. And you and I are both jiu-jitsu black belts. It takes an awfully long time to get from white to black belt. Day in, day out, you're going to get your ass handed to you by people that are smaller than you, weaker than you.
Very humbling.
It's very, very humbling. And I think you're right. I think this sort of translates or transfers over into life. So dealing with adversity on the mat enables you to sort of learn how to control the situation, whether it be an argument with your spouse or whether it, as you said, at a traffic light. These things are minor compared to someone trying to strangle you or, you know, this is kind of life or death. It's in a controlled environment. Leg lock game, this is an interesting one. So the leg lock game has been big with John Danaher. You're starting to see more and more things in MMA. I've done a lot of seminars with different jiu-jitsu practitioners. What's your thoughts on the rise of leg locks? And do you think leg locks would have a place for self-defense?
Okay, so let's look at the self-defense side of things first. If you're put in that position, why the hell not go for it? So I'm never going to go for a leg lock in a self-defense situation because I'm thinking all of these other surroundings. I could be mucking around going for leg locks on somebody, and then somebody else comes to the side of me and kicks me in the head. So I'd much prefer to be on top where I can move around, I can look at my surroundings. But then again, if, let's say like before with the triangle, if I'm put in a situation and maybe I can't get up, I might go for a leg lock or something, even if it's just to do some damage or get some reaction so I can actually kick away and get back to a standing position. But let's say if I'm on top, I'm never going to give up that position to fall backwards and go for a leg lock. I'd much prefer to be on top and control in a situation of like a self-defense situation. Similar to MMA, I remember once where I was getting punched and elbowed in the face and I had half guard, and mid-fight I did like a bit of a sweep, and then I was in a position where I could go for a leg lock, and you'll see on the video I actually went for the leg lock, and I thought quickly like, if I stuff this up, I'm going to be on my back getting punched and elbowed in the face again, which wasn't fun. So instead of going for a leg lock, I just lifted the leg up and got back to my knees and did a technical stand-up. And I think I just drove in the guy into the cage and then ended up going for a body lock because I was like, okay, I want to be in a position where gravity is in my favor. So there's a time and place, but I wouldn't suggest focusing too much on that. And in saying that, I can put that into... I've put that into what I'm teaching my, say, purple belts and brown belts and blue belts. If they're more focused on competing in, say, submission grappling competitions, I'll go all out and show them as many leg locks as I possibly can, depending on the rule set. But if the rule set changes and I've got students that compete in MMA and they're like, say, purple belt level and blue belt level, I'm not dabbling too much into leg locks. I'll show them how to escape the leg locks, how to do the leg locks so they're wary of them, but they should really focus on other things. Same thing with self-defense. There's so many other variables of things that you should be focusing on before you focus on leg locks.
100%, mate. And I think too, like with the leg lock game, I think, yes, you need to learn leg locks. If you did find yourself in a situation where you had an entanglement where your opponent's legs were there, 100% go for the leg. But I guess you made a good point. The idea of using leg entries to wrestle up to get to your feet. So transitioning from X guard, for example, you can transfer into leg entanglements, but also you can utilize X guard to wrestle up to get to your feet. And obviously that works extremely well with MMA. Guys like Husam Paharis, Ryan Hall, that kind of sort of brought the whole leg lock game to MMA. What do you think is going to happen in the next few years? Are we going to start to see more leg locks in MMA?
I would say the funny thing is it's like those guys, for example, there's always been leg locks there. And you can say, okay, cool. Well, they're doing it. Why can't you do it? Well, in other situations, like, well, you could say self-defense situation. You don't know if there's just going to be one person there. There's going to be other people around. So I'd be less likely to do it in a self-defense situation than in MMA when you're in a cage and there's only one person. So you can move around, you know your other options of things, and they're trained fighters. So you might have to go for a leg lock to get something else, to get a guard pass, to open up something else anyway, to open up for strikes. The funny thing is they've always been there. It's just, I guess, with the internet and instructionals coming out, people are dabbling a lot more into them as well. And you see a lot of people crossing over from, say, submission grappling that are already pretty savvy with their leg locks, and then they'll go into, like, you get the combat jiu-jitsu. And that's a good example of people being in positions where you see them going for leg locks, and that's a good stepping stone into MMA. But then again, the guards become much tighter as well because your opponent's on top and they can hit you. But if it's there, go for it. Excellent. Like you said, use it to wrestle up and get back to your feet. If not, you can transition into something else. Just knowing, weighing up the odds. Are you going to get punched or elbowed in the face? There's certain leg lock positions where you can keep the distance and you can kick them away, and then they're nowhere near punching you in the face as well. So that's great. But, I mean, we'll see what happens in the future. But, yeah, it definitely is a trend at the moment.
Definitely. For someone that's interested in martial arts, I mean, there's so many different martial arts out there. We've both done different martial arts ourselves, but for the last however many years, we've just immersed ourselves in jiu-jitsu. I kind of like the idea of building up from the ground up. So, I mean, you touched on kids. Kids obviously learning jiu-jitsu can be great for a bullying perspective, but for someone that's an adult that's wanting to try martial arts, where should they start first? Should they start jiu-jitsu or should they start in striking arts?
See, we do Muay Thai kickboxing, we do MMA, we do boxing here, we do a bit of judo as well as jiu-jitsu, gi and no gi. It depends on how much time and energy you've got and you're willing to actually put in to, I mean, I've always wanted to be the one because I initially got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because I was watching the UFC and I was already doing Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, I was already doing Kempo, so I was pretty good at striking and then I was okay at grappling. But I wanted to be good at absolutely everything. I never wanted to be put in a certain situation where I was like, oh, I don't have an answer. So it's hard to be good at absolutely everything. And if you can only commit 2 times a week or maybe 3 times a week, I would probably stick to one discipline. So it's completely up to them what they want to do. They could jump in and just do jiu-jitsu, or they might like striking. They might want to do that. If you've got a lot of time, you can do as much as you want. It really depends on what they're getting into martial arts for. I feel if you're a parent, I would probably suggest your kid doing a grappling art. So that looks a hell of a lot better if they're doing self-defense and they're grappling, and taking their attacker down at school as opposed to kneeing and elbowing and kicking them in the body. Yeah, so that's kind of going back into the point that I was making earlier with going over self-defense or like security locks, for example. Like I know a couple of guys that I've been teaching and they're like, I don't know how to grapple, but I can't continue to elbow and knee these attackers in the face. It doesn't really look too good. Then if it goes a quarter or anything, it's going to be very hard. Where I feel grappling would be the best for kids that are just starting out, as long as, like I'm assuming myself, I don't have any kids, but initially you would get your kid into martial arts for self-defense, as opposed to, forget that, I just want them to be a world champion at jiu-jitsu or a world champion Muay Thai fighter. Maybe that will come along down the track, but I would definitely recommend that parents get their kids into some form of grappling, whether it's jiu-jitsu or it's judo or say freestyle wrestling. That's going to be better for self-defense as opposed to something like, say, like a striking art initially, just so they can get that body awareness and that push and pull aspect of where they're kind of constantly having to adjust and there's nothing set in stone where they do a punch, you block like this and it works. You don't really know. So anything that I find with martial arts, and they're the main martial arts that I've always done, is ones that you can actually do 100%. So you can spar, see if it works. Okay, cool, punches, kicks, knees and elbows, they've kind of been proven to work. Obviously jiu-jitsu, we know that it does work because we see it all the time. And if it doesn't work, you'll realize straight away. Same thing as like freestyle wrestling or judo, you know they work. And MMA, it's just kind of putting it all together. So I don't really know if that answers the question, but it's personal preference. Do you want to get into it to get fit? Awesome. Just throw yourself in the deep end and just do whatever and just find out what works for you. For self-defense, I would get them doing a grappling art, and then I'd probably down the track maybe get them doing MMA, because it's pointless doing jiu-jitsu for competition if your school doesn't really teach any strikes or what to do, and all you're doing is open guard and De La Riva and spider guard. That's really good until somebody goes to punch you in the face. And then you realize straight away, oh, this isn't that good. It's not really working. That's where no-gi is going to be a little bit more beneficial because it's a tighter game. Yes, you can invert around and do funky leg locks and things like that. But if you want to do it for self-defense, maybe go to a school that's really focusing on self-defense initially. So I know most of my blues and purples, if somebody's throwing punches and kicks and knees and elbows, they should know what to do to, even if they're not a striker, to close a gap, to take their opponent down, to get to a good position where they can tap them out or they can just control the situation. So it's naive to think that they only know what to do on the ground, unless that's all they do. So it's good to have an all-round approach for self-defense, I feel.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think it's just finding out what fits or works for you. And I think with children, we can go back to obviously BJJ for kids. I think for a bullying situation, I think it's great for children to learn grappling arts. How about injuries, mate? You've had a lot of time off the mat, especially with having back surgery and things like that. For anyone else that I guess has had situations where they've been off the mat, they haven't been able to train because of injuries. How have you managed injuries for yourself?
Martial arts is what I love. It's funny when people will come up to me like, oh, my toe's still sore from the other day. I haven't been able to train for a week. And in my mind, I hate to say it, but I'm just like, shut the fuck up. It's been one week. You'll be fine. I'm a coach, but also I don't want to hear about your injuries because I've got my own. And if you focus on them, that's what jiu-jitsu is. You adapt. You know, you're like, oh, I can't pass his guard. I'll try go for a submission. Then I can pass his guard or something. But injury-wise, you just got to do what you can do. Okay, so at the end of the day, you can look at it as, oh, maybe you hurt your wrist. Okay, is it really, really bad? And you may need to have surgery and you're in a lot of pain because you've done a lot of damage. Maybe it's best to have a little bit of time off. But there's a difference between pain and injury. And a lot of people blur the lines. If it's pain, suck it up. You'll be fine. Just avoid it. If it's really, really bad and you have to go get physio and if it's muscular pain, I don't care. It's all good. Suck it up. You'll be fine. But if you've damaged it and you may have to have surgery, you should definitely take it easy. But if it's just pain, you're sore, you did a workout prior, you're sore from the last couple of days of training, suck it up. Or if you're really bad, have a day off. Yeah. If you have to have surgery, maybe don't train. But then again, that's why people in jiu-jitsu have so many injuries. They just don't want to stop training. And I'm a perfect example of that as well. I work around it and then I'll keep doing it because I love it so much. Yeah. So in a way, it's an addiction where I want to get that feeling of releasing endorphins and, oh, no, I have to do this. So, because if I don't do it, I'll get a little bit depressed. And then, like myself, I'm a bit injured at the moment, so I'm not able to roll that much. But I still teach classes and I still do what I can. And instead of that, I'm like, oh, my shoulder's a bit damaged, my wrist is a bit damaged. So it's probably not the safest thing to actually train at the moment doing jiu-jitsu. So I might hit the bag just with one arm and use my legs, or I might go for a run, or I might try to do some weights. So I'm still kind of getting that feeling in a way. So,
yeah, definitely. I think you made some good points there. I think especially with injuries, we all get injured, and depending on the severity of the injury, there's always a way around it. Yeah. So especially obviously with your situation, with back surgery, jiu-jitsu is one of those arts where depending on where you end up, there are situations where you might find yourself in. But what was the recovery like for you with back surgery? Because I've heard Hickson Gracie, Braulio Estima, Joe Rogan, Eddie Bravo has similar situations with injuries. What's the recovery like?
Well, before we go into that, I hate to say that there are people that look similar. They're doing the same thing and walking in my footsteps, which I was like, all good, train hard, fight easy. That was our motto back in the day, where it's like, I'm training too hard. I'm not even making it to the fight. I'm injuring myself, so I have to pull out of a fight because I have a bad injury. If you've got a bad injury, and I know a lot of people just keep pushing through, that's when you're going to do long-term damage and it's going to be chronic. Where I'm constantly saying, it's like talking to a younger sibling and you're just like talking to a brick wall. They have to go through their own mistakes before they even listen to you because they know better than you. But, it is what it is. It's if you are injured, relax, take it easy, because I'm a prime example of pushing it too far to where I can't even do things the way I want to do them anymore. Back surgery, going into that, It's been interesting ride. I it got to the stage where like I was teaching and it would be okay here and then. I'd have a little bit of back pain. I remember once it got to the stage where like I'd always had a bit of a sore back and I thought that was completely normal anyway. So I had a pars defect, which your spine slightly shifts. It's spondylolisthesis, which is very, very common. Over time, I started to compress the nerve, and I remember it was like quite local, the pain initially, and then I just couldn't get rid of the pain. And it was about 4 or 5 months where whatever position I was in, I couldn't really relieve any pressure off the injury. So, and then it subsided, and then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks later, I started getting nerve pain down the side of my leg, which wasn't that bad. It was all good. It was initially in my hip. And then over time, it went down into my tibia and then went into my toes. And then it got to the stage where I couldn't straighten my leg or I'd be sneezing or coughing and I'd instantly feel nerve pain. And I remember coming in and it was like every second day I'd be taking anti-inflammatories or painkillers, not even training at all, just to teach classes where I was kind of on the sidelines and not really showing a lot of physical stuff at all. So I probably left it way too long, and after that, I had to wait. I got private healthcare, and then it was 1.5 years later before I actually got surgery, where they said, "All right, your discs, you've got 2 prolapsed discs, and the nerve pain is going to work into the next step would be you'll start to lose your bowel movements, and you have to have like a bag,
like a catheter,
a catheter for the rest of your life." And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, I'll get surgery. So surgery was interesting. It's the recovery process was I went through my stomach. It was probably 4 or 5 days that I was in hospital learning how to stand and walk again. Had a lot of stitches there internally. I would say it was probably close to almost 2 years.
Wow.
And now I'd say it's probably about 90%. There's certain things that I'm avoiding, like, explosive takedowns, like hip throws, rotating, wrestling with really big guys, getting sprawled on underneath. But I think it's more building the confidence and getting back to that. But initially, it was just learn how to walk again for the first couple of months. And then I came back probably too soon, but it was after 2 months and I was trying to teach because I just had to be a part of something I was going crazy at home. But quite the experience anyway. So it's still a journey and I'm still not completely there yet. But yeah, I'm so glad I got it done. I could not see myself doing anything at all the next couple of years if I wasn't going to get surgery. So
chokes, we were talking with regards to no gi variations, but also the hundreds of chokes that you can actually do in a jiu-jitsu kimono or a gi. I've been playing around with chokes using hoodie jumpers, jackets, and different materials like that. We live in Australia, it's a hotter climate, but in the months June, July, August, most people tend to be rugged up in winter wear. If you lived in places in the world like Iceland or Moscow, Russia, most people are covered up. One of the main principles of kinetic fighting, which is the martial arts program used in the Australian Army, is make use of any available weapons. What are your thoughts on choking modifications that can be utilized in the gi and how they can transfer to the street?
I think it's incredibly important. You always hear those randoms say, "Yeah, but if you're going to be as if you're going to be wearing a gi in the street." You're like, "Yeah, but you're not going to be wearing clothes unless you just do no gi." You're like, "Well, there's going to be something there to grab. Like maybe if you're on the beach or something like that, and then somebody attacks you or something like that, you can use your no-gi techniques. But if the gi's there, take advantage. And by all means, the gi kind of looks like a jacket, so you can use a jacket." So it's funny where I remember a video where it was a court case, and I think it was in Japan, and one of the guys got annoyed with one of the other guys, one of the lawyers or something like that, and literally just grabbed his jacket and did like a full Tominagi and just did a full judo throw and flipped him over the top. Which, I mean, it's important, I feel, that if you're doing it for self-defense, you should be able to go, oh, cool, I can see how this is very similar to a gi. So maybe train in a jacket or train with a hoodie on. And that's incredibly important because, you know, are you going to be in the situation where you're like, oh, I've only just done no gi, but there's something I can grab? I mean, yes, you can hook the head and you can get underhooks and overhooks and things like that. But if somebody's got a uniform on, like I don't do a hell of a lot of gi these days, but as soon as I put the gi on, I am definitely going to use the gi to my advantage and try and choke them out with it. So why wouldn't I do that if I was in a situation, worst case scenario, self-defense, and they've got a jacket? There's an opportunity to go for a gi choke by pulling that, you know, shirt around or collar around and choking them out if that's an option. Why wouldn't you use it? So it makes a hell of a lot of sense to do that.
100%. I think I like the idea of making use of any available weapons. And to me, that hoodie is like a hangman's noose. It's a death sentence. You grab someone with a hoodie, not only for a choking device, but for even winter wear, like we're talking about takedowns. You throw someone onto the concrete in a woolly jumper, it's devastating. Absolutely devastating. So I think martial arts for me has just helped me so much throughout life, and it's how you and I connected. And I honestly think that anyone that trains in martial arts, they're better people, and I can relate to people like that. And for me, I think the legacy that I want to leave is to make a positive impact, add something to the world, and change as many lives as possible. What are some goals or long-term goals that you are looking to strive for in martial arts and teaching martial arts?
Very similar to yourself in the way, basically what you just said. My goals are changed from being a bit more like not as selfish, where I don't have as many goals myself, but helping other people makes you feel better. And as you said, martial artists are some of the kindest people ever. And I've got all the time in the world to help those people that deserve it through martial arts in any way I possibly can. So I'm more than happy with the journey that I'm on. Is you get to the stage where it's just you're just giving back in a way because of I am more than happy to just help out as many people through martial arts as I possibly can. And I'm happy to do that with whatever direction that may head down, and just leaving that positive impact on as many people as I possibly can through martial arts.
Yeah, I love that, Gav. I love that, mate. The Olympics are on this year, and one of the sports that have made the Olympics is breakdancing. But I'd be curious to know what your thoughts would be in the next coming Olympics, if we'll ever see submission grappling or even mixed martial arts in the Olympic Games. What do you think?
Oh, that would be awesome. I mean, there's worse sports than breakdancing. I mean, I might even watch a bit of breakdancing, but I don't know, the general population, there's some sports that are in there that are so pointless, and I have no idea why on earth they watch it. I feel if different martial arts were going to go into the Olympics, they've got to change the rule set to where there's action, there's something happening. There's a limited time on the ground because us black belts or people that do jiu-jitsu, we can see the fine-tuned details. If you look at boxing, you're like, everybody knows that, if you land a hard punch, you can knock that person out. But if they're transitioning from, say, side control to north-south, you're like, what the hell is going on here? Yeah. For the general population, it looks boring. Where I could see martial arts like MMA going in, they might have to obviously change the rule set to a certain extent, but it would be good. Like from an outsider's point of view, somebody who knows nothing, minimal grappling, something similar to, say, Kudo, for example, where you're allowed to punch, you're allowed to kick, you're allowed to knee, you're allowed to elbow, probably leave the headbutts out, but you can throw, you can trip, you can sweep, you can double leg, do all of those things, but there's a minimal time on the ground, so the general population doesn't get a bit like, oh my God, this is boring. Old school MMA fans are like, just stand them back up because all they want to see is just people punch on, really. I think something like that would be way more entertaining than, sounds bad, yes, I'm a black belt. Some jiu-jitsu black belt matches are so freaking boring. Nothing happens because of the rule set. Take your partner down, hold, move around enough to where you're not done for stalling, and then you win the match. But can you blame them because maybe they're not that much better than their opponent to pass a guard and go for a submission, because obviously the other person knows. It's like weighing up the pros and cons. Is it worth trying it or not? So that's where, if you have a sport that, I mean, there's so much to jiu-jitsu that there's too many positions for, I think, the general population to just understand everything, where I think MMA would be a little bit easier. But, this is all wishful thinking anyway. It would be cool to watch.
Yes.
But it's got to be entertaining as well, as
from
a purist.
Spectator sport, 100%.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I'm not overly going out of my way to watch certain matches. I'm like, the big heavyweights, boring. They're not going to do anything but try and do a takedown and stall.
Yes.
But I understand why, because it's a rule set. So change a rule set.
Yeah. And Gav, where can people find you, mate?
I teach at Miami Fight Club in Miami, obviously on the Gold Coast. I'm pretty much there every single day, so definitely catch me there. Otherwise, on social media, just gav.bjj. Send me a message. Anything like that, you can catch me on social media through Instagram, Facebook, YouTube channel. But otherwise, just down at Miami Fight Club Jiu-Jitsu.
And you've also got some online courses as well. Where can people purchase your online jiu-jitsu courses?
They can just go to my Instagram, and it'll just be through the link there. So, just gav.bjj, a bunch of jiu-jitsu courses if you're keen to head down that route and have a look. So, as well as the YouTube page, there's hundreds of videos just for fun.
Yeah, and you have some really good content on your Instagram page. Every time I see a new reel, I study it, I watch it over and over again. You have some fantastic content, mate. Really good stuff. Gavin Hain, thank you very much for jumping on.
Awesome. Thank you, James. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome, Gav. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Speak to you soon.